Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Gates. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Beyond the Gates, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday, even though my brain keeps trying to convince me it didn't. The sunlight was cutting through the blinds in thin, sharp stripes, and I was lying there, barely awake, with Andre's arm draped across my chest like some heavy, drunk anchor. My head felt like it had been run over by a freight train. My mouth tasted like regret mixed with stale alcohol, and there was a faint smell of cigar smoke lingering in the room. I squinted at the clock and groaned. 10:47 a.m., the sun already high, mocking me for the night I'd survived. Or more accurately, the night I had no memory of. Andre stirred beside me, groaning in a way that sounded suspiciously like he was having the same existential crisis I was. Slowly, very, very slowly, we started piecing things together. First came the faint ache in our fingers, where something metallic, was pressing into our skin. Then we noticed the rings. Matching rings. And finally, the marriage certificate lying on the nightstand, slightly crumpled and smelling faintly of smoke. "Oh no," I whispered, dragging a hand down my face. My chest tightened as realization set in like ice water. "Oh, no. Andre, we did it. We actually did it." He blinked, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to process what I just said. "We married," he asked cautiously, his voice hoarse, fragile.
"Wait."
"We actually tied the knot." "Yes," I groaned, flopping back onto the pillow. "Yes, we did. And there's no one I would rather not remember marrying than you." My tone was half joke, half panic, but my heart was thundering in my chest. That was the reality now. We were legally bound, whether our hungover brains approved or not. Andre laughed, a little nervous, a little in shock. "Well, at least we didn't get arrested?" He tried to make it sound casual, but I could tell the panic was clawing at him just like it was at me. We lay there in silence for a few moments, both of us processing the immensity of what we'd done. Not in a good way, either. The reality of it was hitting us harder than any hangover. Our impulsive, alcohol-fueled decisions had cemented themselves into something legally binding. And for the first time, I realized that forever wasn't just a vague concept. It was staring me right in the face. Eventually, we got up, shuffled around in a haze of disbelief, and began gathering ourselves to leave the chaos we'd created. The apartment smelled of last night's chaos. Empty bottles, scattered clothes, that unmistakable scent of regret. I could barely make myself look at Andre without imagining the endless conversations, awkward dinners, and, God forbid, arguments we were now destined to have as husband and wife. Meanwhile, across town, Smitty was having a different kind of morning chaos. He was pacing outside Orphe Jean's diner like a storm about to hit, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Martin and Samantha were inside, enjoying a quiet moment with June, and the innocence of it infuriated Smitty. He didn't care about his own pride or ego. What scared him was the possibility of someone hurting the kids, emotionally or otherwise, under the guise of fun. "You are risking our relationship just to score cool points with our kid," he snapped once Samantha emerged, waving hello with that uncomfortable grin of hers. Smitty's voice was sharp, but beneath it lay a desperation he couldn't mask. "Any future visits happen with a family member present. No exceptions." Samantha bit her lip, unsure how to respond. June, always sweet and unassuming, squeezed her mom's hand, looking between Smitty and Samantha with quiet confusion. There was love here, yes, but it was tangled with boundaries, fear, and control, things Smitty knew too well from past mistakes. And the diner confrontation was only heating things further. Marcel, the crooked cop who thought he could manipulate his way through life, had finally met his match in Smitty. One warning, one firm stance, and Smitty had made it clear. Cross the line again, and everything Marcel thought he knew about controlling others would explode. Secrets, profiles, and leverage, Smitty had it all in reserve. And June, though seemingly innocent in her desire to bond with the kids, was caught in the crossfire of adult battles that had nothing to do with her. Back in our apartment, Andre and I were cautiously unpacking the evidence of our impulsive night. The cigar band rings were still on our fingers, the marriage certificate on the counter mocking us. I stared at it, trying to imagine explaining this to our families or worse, to our friends. "This is unreal," Andre muttered, sitting on the edge of the couch. He rubbed his face with both hands and let out a long, frustrated sigh. "How did we even get here? I barely remember leaving the bar, and now we're legally married." I flopped down beside him, hugging the pillow to my chest. "I know. I can't even. What do we do now?" My voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear and anxiety bubbling under the surface. We were adults. We were supposed to make responsible choices, and yet here we were, caught in the aftermath of a night that defied logic and reason. Andre leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers. "I guess we deal with it," he said finally. "We face our families, figure out what to do, and somehow survive this." Meanwhile, Jacob had his own storm brewing. Derek had moved into Ashley's apartment, and the air between them was thick with unspoken words. Alone together, Derek's nervous attempt to hide a ring, a symbol of feelings he wasn't ready to confront, slipped into the cracks of their conversation. "Jacob, please don't tell Ashley," Derek pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking for your approval, just your silence." Jacob nodded, though unease gnawed at him. He wanted to support Derek, but there was also an undeniable sense of responsibility to Ashley, to the truth. The tension lingered like smoke in a closed room, palpable and suffocating. By evening, Naomi and Jacob raised a toast to Derek and Ashley, smiling for appearances, but Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted, something unspoken yet undeniable. And then there was Vanessa and Doug. Their evening at Uptown started with the usual tension, the kind that made every interaction feel like walking on glass. Doug's announcement that he was joining a high-stakes poker game ignited an argument, exposing fractures in their relationship that had been simmering for weeks. "You give up your vices, and I'll give up mine," Doug finally said, slamming his hands down on the table before storming out. Vanessa sat frozen for a moment, processing the words, the weight of the ultimatum, and the sudden void left by his departure. Joey, ever the opportunist, swooped in with an alternative, a romantic trip to Puerto Rico. At first, Vanessa hesitated, but eventually the temptation proved too strong. She packed her bags and left with him, choosing adventure and uncertainty over the safe, familiar tension of her current life. By the time I finally sat down that evening, Andre and I were exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. The day had forced us to confront our worst fears, impulsive decisions, the weight of consequences, and the fragile nature of human relationships. But despite the chaos, there was a thread of something unspoken between us, a recognition that, no matter how absurd, how messy, or how utterly ridiculous this all was, we were in it together. I looked at Andre, who was staring blankly at the wall, and whispered, "We'll figure it out. Somehow. One step at a time." And for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos, a small, fragile ember that maybe, just maybe, we could survive our own mistakes. The next morning, the weight of reality didn't get any lighter. Andre and I were sitting at a small diner, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I hadn't even wanted to drink, my brain still rattling from the events of the previous night. Andre stared out the window, a cigarette dangling between his fingers, though neither of us had the energy to light it. "I keep thinking about the what-ifs," I said, almost to myself. What if someone sees the certificate before we tell them? What if our families, what if our friends? My voice cracked, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I hated crying in front of Andre. It felt like admitting defeat, but the honesty of it was unavoidable. Andre reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His grip was warm, grounding, and for a moment it was enough. "Hey," he said softly, "I know. I feel it too. But we can't live in a loop of panic forever. We have to handle this, step by step." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the truth was, the impulsive act of drunken marriage wasn't something that could be fixed with a few steps. It had ramifications, responsibilities, faces to face, words to explain. And somewhere deep down, the thought of looking my family in the eyes and saying, "Yeah, we did this," was almost unbearable. Meanwhile, Smitty's warning to June had left a ripple. June, sweet, empathetic June, was feeling cornered. She understood why Smitty was protective. She had seen what could happen when kids were caught in adult games of power, but at the same time, her maternal instinct told her that she needed to spend time with her kids. She felt torn between Smitty's rules and her own heart. "I just want to see them," June whispered to Samantha later that day. "Is that so wrong?" Samantha, who had grown up navigating complex adult dynamics herself, gave her mother a gentle squeeze. "It's not wrong," she said softly, "but it's complicated. You need to be careful, Mom. Smitty isn't trying to hurt you. He's trying to protect everyone, including you." June nodded, but inside, a storm was brewing. She had always been the kind of person who followed her heart, even when it got her into trouble. And this time, her heart was screaming for her children, her connection with them, which meant she couldn't just step back entirely. Back in my apartment, Andre and I were planning our conversation with the world. We didn't even know where to start. Should we call our parents first? Text our friends? Pretend nothing happened until someone noticed the rings? The questions piled up like bricks in my chest. "Maybe we just explain it like it is," Andre suggested reluctantly. "Say, yeah, it was a mistake. But here we are." He tried to smile, but it was shaky, unsure. I groaned. "That sounds terrible. Absolutely terrible. But maybe it's the only way." We both sat in silence for a while after that. Silence that was heavy with fear, but also a strange kind of acceptance. Maybe we weren't ready for forever. Maybe we weren't prepared for this mess, but it was real. And somehow, we had to face it. Meanwhile, Jacob's internal battle was intensifying. Derek's request for silence weighed heavily on him, gnawing at his sense of loyalty and morality. He could see Derek's vulnerability, the fear of hurting Ashley, and it made him want to protect him. But at the same time, keeping secrets never came without consequences. That night, Jacob found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror, thinking about the fine line between friendship and betrayal. "Am I doing the right thing?" he muttered to himself. He wanted to do right by both Derek and Ashley, but the reality was messy. Human feelings rarely fit into neat little boxes. And then there was Vanessa. Packing her bags for Puerto Rico had been easy in theory and terrifying in practice. She felt exhilaration mixed with guilt. Doug's ultimatum still echoed in her mind, sharp and accusatory. But Joey's promise of adventure, of escaping the confines of her stagnant life, was intoxicating. The plane ride was quiet, but every glance at Joey made her heart race. She wondered if she was running away, or if she was finally chasing something she had denied herself for too long. By the time the plane touched down in San Juan, she realized that every choice had consequences, and some of them were unavoidable. But for the first time in a long time, she felt alive, unchained by her own hesitation. Back in our little city, Smitty's confrontations were far from over. Marcel had tried testing boundaries again, but Smitty had the upper hand. The tension between them was palpable. Every glance, every word exchanged, felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. Smitty wasn't just protecting his family, he was safeguarding his integrity, his sense of justice. And while it made him harsh, it also made him painfully human. June, caught in the middle, could feel the strain of adult conflicts bleeding into her own life. She knew that the kids were watching, learning, that her choices, her mistakes, and her defiance would shape them in ways she couldn't yet predict. It was a heavy realization, one that kept her awake at night. Back with Andre and me, the day wore on like a slow-moving storm. We finally made the call to our parents, our hands shaking, our voices wavering. Explanations stumbled out, laughter forced, tears threatened. And yet, to our surprise, there was relief on the other end. Our families understood, maybe not completely, maybe not perfectly, but they recognized the humanity behind our mistakes. Andre reached across the table at dinner, fingers brushing mine.
See?
Not the end of the world, he said, half teasing, half serious. I smiled weakly. Not yet, I replied.
But
I guess this is life. Messy, unpredictable, impossible to control. And somehow we survive it. That night, as I lay in bed, Andre asleep beside me, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past 48 hours. Impulsive choices, emotional confrontations, secrets kept and revealed, love tested and strained. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. And yet it was real, human, beautiful in its chaotic, flawed, deeply emotional way. I knew there were more challenges ahead. Smitty would continue to guard June and the kids with fierce intensity. Jacob would wrestle with his conscience, balancing loyalty and truth. Vanessa would face the consequences of her choices in Puerto Rico, both thrilling and terrifying. And Andre and I, well, we had a long, complicated path ahead as newlyweds who hadn't planned any of this. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something that had been missing in all the chaos. Hope. Not certainty. Not security. But hope that we could face this mess together, survive the consequences, and maybe, just maybe, come out stronger on the other side.